Jonathan's initial thought was to take the very frail-appearing white monkey to a nearby vet for treatment when he discovered it in the forest. But he would soon come to understand that this was a grave error. He should have just left it there, as he was not even dealing with a monkey. However, it was already too late. Jonathan had become even more certain of his suspicions after seeing the veterinarian's response. No monkey had been saved from the forest by him. This was definitely something new, and he was about to receive the assurance he was seeking. The veterinarian returned from the clinic. However, he was missing the tiny white creature. When he put a hand on Jonathan's shoulder and said, "I know it's not your fault, but you made a big mistake," he appeared worried. But what sort of creature did Jonathan rescue from the forest? Why exactly would leaving it alone have been preferable? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Since he can remember, Jonathan has had a deep affection for animals. And he would not be on a rescue mission for an animal today for the first time. He adored the outdoors and frequently went for walks through the woods. Today, like so many other days, he would lend a hand to an animal in need. However, things are not as they seem. He was quite adept at aiding animals. He knew a few veterinarians in the city and was able to recognize simple issues. This implied that he had good confidence in his ability to recognize animals, but this particular situation would be different. The newborn animal was alone, which was the main issue, but the trouble was about to begin. Jonathan was certain he heard an animal calling for aid during one of his treks through the woods outside of the city. In the woods, he stopped and waited to hear it once more. Jonathan was committed to locating the puppy. He moved into the woodland while paying attention to the cries and taking slow, careful steps. When the crying eventually stopped, he momentarily believed he had lost the puppy. When Jonathan heard the quiet whimpering again, he took a few steps back in fear that he had gone too far. He finally spotted the small animal, but a tiny patch of moss covered the ground, and a white baby monkey with undeveloped eyes was sleeping there. Jonathan examined the little creature for a while, hoping to spot any injuries of any kind. Jonathan found the small moss bed containing the alleged monkey to be unusual and odd. This was not something that would typically be discovered in nature. Maybe an animal had constructed it as a kind of nest. He turned the cover of his travel bag into a temporary container and placed the puppy inside it with care. Jonathan walked back to his car, stopping frequently to check on the puppy. Jonathan didn't want the young infant to get cold or wet because it was supposed to rain. However, the more he observed the animal, the more intrigued he became. Even though he had his doubts, he was now almost certain it wasn't a monkey. What was it then? Whatever the creature was, Jonathan would take care of it and find it the assistance it required. The monkey would most likely be accepted by a shelter, but first, it needed to see a doctor, and it took a half hour to drive to the city. After some more time passed, Jonathan finally arrived at the parking lot. He only needed 2 seconds to see that something was seriously wrong. There was no one in the parking lot. There was nobody present. That would be typical given the approaching weather, but his car was also gone. Jonathan stood up and headed over to where he thought he had parked it. Thinking he might be mistaken, he quickly walked around the parking lot in search of his car. It was not able to be towed. Jonathan stooped to the pavement and discovered a lot of broken glass. Now it was clear that his automobile had been smashed into and taken. He made the choice to report his automobile being stolen to the police first. Now, Jonathan provided the authorities with information on his vehicle, including its kind, make, model, where it had been, its license plate, and any other pertinent information. Although it was all they could do at the moment, the police assured him that they would keep an eye out for it. He said thank you and hung up. He was still stranded despite that being completed. The little creature in his pack still needed attention, so he refrained from heading to his city residence. He had to go to the veterinarian before heading back home. Jonathan started by using the Uber app. Nobody wanted to travel so far outside the city to take him up. Although Jonathan was eager to pay the fare, nobody wanted to take him. Next, Jonathan tried using a taxi service. He tried to explain his predicament, but they all rejected him. They were concerned that the situation was a ruse to rob them and their drivers. Jonathan wasn't yet deterred by this. There were many cab firms in a city that size, but he lost heart when each one rejected him. After being rejected by the 6th firm, Jonathan was enraged. He was in a desperate situation, and it was now beginning to shower. The cold was not where he wanted to be. It was time to make a significant change. He intended to get a ride. Even though not many cars traveled down this road, one finally had to. Just a matter of time, really. Fortunately, he only had to wait a few minutes for a car to come around the bend. Jonathan said his thanks and started working. Jonathan flagged down on the automobile and then extended his thumb to signal that he wanted a ride. A woman of middle age slid down her automobile window. Jonathan described what had transpired, that he needed a ride into the city because his car had been stolen, which he accepted his story. She had the good fortune to be going to the city as well and had no trouble getting Jonathan to go with her. She appeared sympathetic and accepted his account. As soon as he sat down in the passenger seat, he noticed a strange sound emanating from the car's backseat. Jonathan stood up and focused on the animal in his arms. Soon later, they arrived at the veterinarian. After wishing him well, the woman left him in front of the structure. Jonathan sat in the waiting area after signing in at the front desk, keeping the small animal tucked inside the bundle to prevent upsetting the other animals in the workplace. However, he did demonstrate the animal to the receptionist, who shared Jonathan's sense of direction. She told Jonathan that, because the animal appeared to be in severe shape, she would move him up the list so as not to disturb the other animals. The vet listened intently and made notes as he described what had happened in the jungle. The meeting only lasted about 5 minutes before Jonathan was told to return to the waiting area. The vet would occasionally ask questions. Jonathan could concentrate on other crucial issues now that the veterinarian was taking care of the infant animal, the theft of his car, to name one. When Jonathan dialed the police to report that his automobile had been stolen, he was astonished to learn that he would have to be moved to a different division. Well, thankfully, they had discovered his automobile, which explains this. A police officer saw the car and pulled it over for a regular inspection after learning that the thief had driven into town with a shattered window. After the thief and the automobile were detained when the driver was unable to provide his information, Jonathan called in seconds later. Jonathan was taken aback to learn all of his information, but he was relieved that everything had gone smoothly in that regard. He still had a few steps to complete before the car could be given to him, not to mention his insurance. But before he could take action, he felt a frantic tap on his shoulder. The vet was there. After apologizing to the officers, Jonathan hung up. The doctor's intense expressions somewhat perplexed him, but his questions will soon be answered. Jonathan's heart sank as the vet said, "I know it's not your fault, but you made a big mistake bringing this animal in here." Next, the more the doctor explained, the more defeated Jonathan appeared to be. As it turned out, the little animal was in a serious condition, and since the illness had advanced, there was nothing the veterinarian could do to help it. That wasn't the worst part, though. The animal posed a serious threat to the other animals at the clinic in its present state. The veterinarian said that the animal had a virus that was extremely contagious among smaller mammals. Not only was it very contagious, but if not treated in a timely manner, it might be lethal. Jonathan's brows first arched in question before his eyes rounded in astonishment. A powerful glider? His fears had been confirmed, and he was in fact not dealing with a puppy after all. But he almost laughed at the predicament. However, he genuinely would not have imagined that the young animal was a super glider. The veterinarian went on to explain. The veterinarian had spent the previous 2 weeks researching the virus that had afflicted the super glider, so he was familiar with it. To stop the infection from infecting other animals, the vet and Jonathan would both require fresh clothing and a shower. Fortunately for Jonathan and the clinic personnel, there was little chance of getting the virus because people are immune to it. Jonathan felt a lot better after hearing this, but the doctor went on to say that even after following the shower regimen, the other animals would still need to be examined for safety. All of the exams were completed a short while afterward. All of the animals' tests came back negative, the doctor said as he emerged again. Another piece of good news was that the sick super glider would be treated. It seemed obvious in hindsight that he ought to have abandoned the young super glider in the woods. But however, at the time, it did not seem proper to leave a baby animal behind. Even now, he was happy that he had chosen to make an effort to keep it. He had a close relationship with the super glider. He was concerned that the super glider wouldn't succumb to the infection. He kept in touch with the veterinarian. Then he received a call a few weeks later. Jonathan sped as quickly as he could to the vet without turning around. The veterinarian then entered the waiting area. The doctor asked Jonathan a startling question after giving him a quick glance. Jonathan was asked, "Have you picked on a name for the super glider?" There was a moment of stillness as he asked, "A name?" "Why would I need to choose a name?" Jonathan said. "Monkey. I would like to name him Monkey." The door eventually opened. The assistant entered the space carrying the super glider. The veterinarian reported that the animal had successfully recovered from the illness and was doing great, but given its current weakness, it would never survive in the wild. The doctor then posed the crucial query to Jonathan, and Jonathan was overjoyed that the animal had done well and asked, "Will you take him home?" because he had never before taken care of a super glider. He wasn't sure if he was the right fit. After taking a deep breath, he told the doctor, "Yes, I would like to take him home." When Jonathan brought the tiny super glider home, he was ecstatic. Jonathan and Monkey became close friends. They played quite a bit. Then, though, something awful occurred. Monkey scaled a tree and then vanished. After spending hours in the tree, Jonathan saw no sign of the monkey. He chose to remain there because he was unsure of what to do. Jonathan lamented Monkey's departure. Jonathan went back to the tree the following day in search of a monkey's indication. Once more, after a few hours, he still couldn't locate the super glider. Jonathan made the decision to go home once more. Then, though, something extraordinary occurred. Unexpectedly, a super glider leaped out of the tree and began to soar. He encircled Jonathan before coming to rest on his shoulder. He remained perched on Jonathan's shoulder while they cuddled. It was a monkey, Jonathan knew. They left for home again, but Jonathan sensed that something was off. Did Monkey intend to go back home? If Monkey wasn't better off in the wild, Jonathan questioned. Eventually, Jonathan and Monkey returned home. But Jonathan was going to release Monkey back into nature tomorrow. Jonathan took Monkey to the closest tree in his backyard the following morning. As he ascended the tree, he said goodbye to the monkey. He left after a short period of time. Jonathan was confident in his choice. Jonathan made the decision to go for a walk in the forest that evening. On Thursday evenings, Jonathan always took a stroll through the forest, but he was hoping to see his pal Monkey this time. Suddenly, he noticed something in his garden. Monkey was there, but when he looked more closely, he noticed another creature. Another super glider, was it? They appeared to be waiting for Jonathan to look after them. They entered right away when Jonathan flung open his door. Jonathan was ecstatic, but also a little worried that the other super glider might be infected with the same virus as Monkey had. The following day, Jonathan made the decision to visit the vet again. Jonathan had to visit the vet once more, with a little more attention and urgency this time. The veterinarian made the decision to act and began examining the super glider right away. With Monkey, Jonathan sat in the waiting area, hoping that his new friend wasn't infected.